You've often said that science and art are united by a search for truth, but like you mentioned, the approach they might take is different. Science leads by a facts first approach, establish the empirical evidence, the absolutes, build from there. Fiction, on the other hand, like you mentioned, build up the suspense. Don't show your hand. Do use the show, don't tell approach. Use hidden meaning, symbolism, allusions, and that will make it compelling. Let me ask you, for me, it always felt, at least when I was growing up, the science and arts, it always felt like were two separate, mutually exclusive paths. Like you could always pick one of the two. In high school, that was the idea. In college, programs are structured that way. If you pick science, you're on a separate trajectory in life and you will never merge with art again. For the people, unlike you, who do not dabble in both, let me ask this question on behalf of them. How much of a scientist resides inside every artist, and how much of an artist resides every scientist?
Well, that's a great question. I do think that young people, and especially children, have an appreciation or curiosity, an inclination towards both science and art. So I think that many young people have that from the beginning. That is, that they have an interest in both the sciences and the arts. But it's, as you say, it's our society, friends, parents, teachers who push us in one direction or the other. But I don't think that there's a fundamental incompatibility. They're both creative activities. They both involve a search for truth. The creative moment feels the same in both the sciences and the arts. The tools are very different. But even in a given science, in science, biology is different from physics, which is different from chemistry. The tools are different even within different sciences.
You mentioned society keeps pushing us into these separate paths. Let me check with you something C.P. Snow once said. He said, "A good many times I've been present at the gatherings of people who, by the standards of the traditional culture, are thought highly educated and who have with considerable gusto expressed the incredulity of scientists. Once or twice I have been provoked and have asked the company how many of them could describe the second law of thermodynamics. The response was cold. It was also negative. Yet, I was asking something which is a scientific equivalent of, have you read a work of Shakespeare's? I now believe that if I had asked an even simpler question, such as, what do you mean by mass acceleration, which is a scientific equivalent of saying, can you read? Not more than 1 in 10 of the highly educated would have felt that I was speaking the same language. So the great edifice of modern physics goes up, and the majority of the cleverest people in the Western world have about as much insight into it as their Neolithic ancestors would have had." You spoke about this gulf that is developing in society where they try to push you into science and arts. C.P. Snow made these comments more than half a century ago. He was one of the first few people who dabbled in both science and arts. You're one of the modern luminaries who's done it. You were the first dual faculty appointment, science and humanities. So let me ask you, ever since he made these comments, do you think that gulf between science and arts has widened over the last half a century? Has it narrowed? Has it changed at all? What is your thought on C.P. Snow's comments?
I don't think the gulf has widened. We've become more specialized than we were in C.P. Snow's time. But at the same time, there's a lot more interdisciplinary work. There are a number of areas of endeavor like climate change, or the study of climate change, which involves chemistry, biology, sociology, economics, politics. And so I think counterbalancing the increasing specialization that we've had, which happens with every field of knowledge, that as you learn more, you specialize more. It's inevitable. I mean, it's part of progress. But to counterbalance that, we have recognized that there are more questions and there are more problems that require an interdisciplinary approach. We've also seen many artists who have been inspired by science. And there, just in the last 10 years or so, there have been movies and plays. For example, Tom Stoppard's plays The British Playwright, which involve science. There's the movie about The Beautiful Mind, about the economist and mathematician. And so I think that artists are becoming more and more comfortable with using the territory of science in their art. In the early 1990s, I invited Salman Rushdie to speak at MIT. And it was had to be very carefully arranged because that was right after the fatwa, and we couldn't announce that Rushdie was coming, so I had to invite. But I wanted to fill the house, so I invited Susan Sontag to be the front man. So it was advertised for her, but then she stepped off the stage and Rushdie appeared with all of the Secret Service people around him. And he said a very interesting thing. He knew that he was standing at MIT in a temple of technology and science. And he said that writers and other artists are always looking for new ideas to fuel their work. And he said, no discipline has created more ideas than science. So I think it was a wonderful comment for him to make on that occasion. And it just, I think artists for centuries have been influenced by the new ideas in science. So the influence in the other direction, the artist's influence on science, is, I think, more subtle. But artists do develop a certain vocabulary and a certain range of metaphors that scientists have to use when we are talking about things that are far beyond sensory perception, either in quantum physics, where we're talking about very, very small things, that reality doesn't behave like either particles or waves. A particle can be in several places at once in the quantum world. And we need a new vocabulary to talk about such things and new metaphors. And we often find that from the arts. And of course, philosophy has had a great impact on science. Albert Einstein was much influenced by the Scottish philosopher David Hume in his thinking. So the influence does go in both directions. And to get back to your question, I don't think the gap has increased since the 1960s in C.P. Snow. I think there are actually more opportunities for cross-pollination.